Another new number just released from the new NBC News Des Moines Register Mediacom survey shows 51% say they believe Donald Trump's claims that the 2020 election was stolen from him. 41% say they don't believe it. 8% say they're just not sure. Belief in the so-called big lie is most prevalent among Iowans making less than $70,000 a year, with 69% of them trusting Trump. 62% of Iowa evangelicals and 59% of those without college degrees also believe the election was stolen.
So, Willie, we can, this is the sort of thing. I just don't know how much to pay attention to this. I mean, I don't want to freak anybody out at home. So please hold on to whatever you're holding on to. But there was a point in 2005 where 60% of Democrats thought 9/11 was an inside job. It dissipates, all right? We got the moon landing conspiracies. We got, the JFK conspiracies.
Different timing, though, with social media
Jr. conspiracy.
Technology. And it's a little bit different, Joe.
It's different, and yet it's not different. Willie knew where I was going there. I mean, the thing is, again, so 51% of Republicans think that maybe the election was okay. That, to me, is ground noise. 90%, we got an issue going. 51%, again, the question is, this reverse Bradley effect. If you get a call and you're in Iowa and you feel like the media's been talking down to you your whole life and you go, hi, I'm from New York City. Do you think that the election was stolen from Donald Trump? Or if you're from even the Des Moines Register polling outfit, and you're Ann, there's just a skepticism. So I think my point is, and Willie's trying to figure out what my point is here.
I'm with you. I'm still here.
I think the 51% is actually a lower number than I would have expected at this point in the middle of indictments from people that Donald Trump say are the devil coming after him. And I just think there's this rising exhaustion. And at the same time, I see other polls that show, while 51% may think this, a majority of Iowans, I believe I saw, said, let's stop talking about the 2020 election. I'm hearing that from Republicans. That's a 70, 75% proposition. If they say, sure, it was stolen, they go, let's not talk about 2020 anymore. Let's talk about winning in 2024.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that. And I think the problem is two things. Number one, Donald Trump is a different vessel than we had in any of those other examples that you laid out, meaning there are a lot of people in this country, a lot of Republicans who take what he says as gospel, almost literally, in that poll that we talked about yesterday, where they believe what Donald Trump says more than their family and their friends or their pastor or all the people we trusted growing up, our teachers and our coaches. That's a guy, whatever he says goes for many people in this country. That's one thing. And then I think the other question is, what's the alternative? If it's not Donald Trump, everyone who is exhausted, and I agree, there are a lot of Republicans exhausted by Donald Trump, where do they go? Maybe they thought it was Ron DeSantis for 6 months now. It's been, I don't know, maybe he's not what we thought he was. Gets another shot tomorrow night in Milwaukee to impress some people. So we'll see if the people who are exhausted can find somewhere else to go. Let's talk more about that with senior columnist at the Daily Beast, Matt Lewis. Matt, your latest piece is entitled, Trump Voters Don't Believe in Polls or the Media, Only in Trump. So I'll let you explain the headline a little more and help us suss out what we're seeing in these polls, which is that a lot of people don't think he committed a crime, but also don't think he committed a crime. They still support him, and yet 60% almost in this poll in Iowa say, we hope somebody else emerges.
Right. Well, so I looked at these three prominent polls that have happened recently. One is this AP poll that basically showed 53% of Americans, not Republicans, but general election voters, would not vote for Trump under any circumstance. Then I looked at the CBS News YouGov poll and the NBC News Iowa Des Moines Register poll. And basically what I concluded is if you believe those three polls, and that's the caveat, essentially Donald Trump can't win a general election, but he also can't lose a primary. And this is unusual, right? Because normally, if you are perceived to be unelectable in a general election, that would preclude you from winning the primary. But of course, what we've seen is that Republicans, at least according to these recent polls, are not really persuadable. They're not really movable. They don't care about the electability issue. I think only 29% prize the ability to beat Joe Biden when it comes to making their primary decision. As you just noted, they're not only will they not listen to pollsters or the establishment media, they won't listen to their families as opposed to Donald Trump. They won't listen to their clergy. So it's really hard to imagine a scenario where Donald Trump, again, the caveat here is if you believe the recent polling, it's hard to imagine a scenario where Donald Trump doesn't become the Republican nominee.
I mean, think about this. We've been hearing, Gene, for so long that the Iowa voters are deeply religious. Oh, it's where the Christian evangelicals are. Oh, they're the most. If you go to Iowa,
come on,
they love Jesus
Don't
so much.
No.
We've been hearing that
it is
since Pat Robertson won in 1988, or maybe he was in second. I don't know. Maybe he won. I don't remember. But we've been hearing they're so righteous. Oh, now what do we find out? They trust a four-time indicted reality TV show host who a New York judge called a rapist, who bragged about sexually molesting women, saying that it's the way it's always been, and maybe that's a good thing. He doesn't know whether it's good or not. Twice as many of these voters. Porn star payoff illegal. Yes. I'm talking like no 41. Denial. Porn star payoff illegal. But now, twice as many of them basically say we trust that guy over a minister of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's
and
amazing.
Scene. Go, G.
No, I mean, it's just amazing. What those numbers suggest is that a whole lot of people in Iowa are going to hell, right? I mean, they are not going to be redeemed.
Gene's joking, Iowa people.
It's incredible. No, that is an incredible figure from that poll, that people trust Trump over their clergy, and it does make you wonder, like, what are you, how are you thinking of your Christianity? How are you thinking of your faith to get to that point? Matt, I think you make an incredible point there. But so can we sort of write the story of this election already? I mean, Donald Trump wins the primary and Donald Trump loses the general. I mean, that seems to be what all the numbers are suggesting. Is there any way the Republican Party can avoid this?
Well, I think what Joe's been talking about this morning is the possibility, right, that up until now, and I think in the last two elections, Donald Trump would really underperform among pollsters. People would be shy about admitting, they didn't want to admit they were going to vote for Donald Trump, but then they would. So the question is, has that reversed now? Is it possible that Republican voters want to tell pollsters, want to tell the media they're supporting Trump, but secretly they're open to another possibility? And so this brings us, I guess, to teasing the debate on Wednesday night. I mean, this is an opportunity. Donald Trump will not be there. So Ron DeSantis, who is, I think, clearly in second place nationally, has an opportunity to, I don't want to say close the deal, but how about open the deal, to make himself a viable alternative. Can he do it? I am skeptical, but the ball's in his court.
Yeah, the ball's in his court.
He's going to have to, I don't know, between now and tomorrow night, get a personality. I'm serious.
Well, I mean, there's a lot to be said about
I'm not joking at all.
Blocking and tackling. I would say,
kind of rude.
I'd say actually talk about issues that actually matter to mainstream Republicans. yeah, try not to
yell at people and be
might help.
rude. Try not to focus on these really, really, really wedge issues in the state of Florida that don't mean anything to the rest of the country. Try to explain your 6-week abortion ban. I mean,
Well,
if Ron DeSantis is the next guy, that's we got a long way to go.
Well, I mean, I don't think Ron will be coming to you for debate prep.
Fortunately for him.
Well, maybe fortunately for him, in an Iowa Republican debate. But
he needs
still,
to be nice.
Be nice. It's a good place to start.
Yeah.
I agree. Senior columnist for the Daily Beast, Matt Lewis. We thank you so
Thank you,
much
Matt.
for joining us,
Thanks,
and
Matt.
thank you.